Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Louise. Thank you to anybody who's coming on for the first time. This afternoon, we have brought everyone together to discuss the new Department for Education writing framework that has been released in the UK. And often we will think that a writing framework in the UK might not impact us here. So we're going to look at it, what is the content of the new framework, and we're also going to look at how do we contextualize that in the UAE. To enable us to do this, we have a specialist in literacy and writing, Emma. Emma has joined us from a company called Mighty Writer in the UK. Now, Mighty Writer is a company I met about a year ago. I am absolutely in love with the product that Emma has created herself after many years of it and experience of working in classrooms. And if through the webinar, if we talk about it at all, we do have a Mighty Writer board, which you can see behind Emma. We do have one in the centre, and you are very welcome to come and feel it, come and touch it, come and play with it, come and see what the Mighty Writer is about, because it really helps children to see language in a very different way. And it's non-technology, which is one of the things we really need to start thinking about. So thank you very much for joining us. We have Emma. I will share the slides. I've got some questions for you, Emma.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And if anybody in the audience has any questions, do feel free to pop them into the chat throughout, and we will address them as we go. So, Emma, can you see the slides?
Yes, I can. Thank
Awesome.
you.
So, mahaba and welcome. So, the new Department for Education Writing Framework came out in July. Can
Yeah.
you tell us what are the key changes for primary teaching?
So the new writing framework introduces something called the simple view of writing. And basically what it's doing is dividing writing into two parts, which are equal importance is placed on both. So that is transcription, which is all the technical aspects of actually handwriting, spelling, all of those things, and then composition. So the actual creative side, imagination, storytelling, putting everything together so it makes sense. And what the government is saying and the Department for Education is saying is that those two skills need to be taught very early on, right from when children start in school, and the equal importance should be placed upon both. So where this is impacting is changes in terms of making sure that from reception, children follow a structured handwriting scheme and a structured phonics scheme, so that they're getting those technical skills early on alongside their composition, so that they can have all the skills they need in order to become competent writers. And there's also a really strong focus on developing oracy and the ability to verbalize sentences before they are written down. So that is obviously a really key thing, because obviously children need to be able to say a sentence before they can write it. And it's about being ambitious for children. So being ambitious for all children, for children who are non-verbal, for children who have, specific needs, and about giving them opportunity to, experience wide-ranging vocabulary, and making sure that from reception, very early on, any needs that they might have where things might need to be adapted or scaffolded for them, that intervention is put in place really early on to avoid there becoming gaps as you go. Another key thing is in terms of assessment, and what they're saying is that where before there was everybody had to tick all the boxes, it's now a best fit. So they're looking at a more holistic approach. So looking at a general piece of writing and thinking, has it got basically all the things they need? And if it's missing a few elements, but the overall writing is good, then they fulfill that criteria. And alongside that, there's much more of an emphasis on whole school moderation, working in year groups. So everybody is very au fait with what to look out for, how to assess that writing. So I think
Amazing.
they're the main things.
Okay, so my next question was around that shift in reception and transcription. Explain for us a little bit more about that oral composition, sentence mastery, dictation, and where does that fit in? please?
Okay, so the idea is that that would start really early on, and that you're getting children talking right from the start. And so you're doing things that are very visual for them, like with Mighty Writer, where they can organize pictures, where they're sequencing, anything that helps children to be able to express themselves, develop ownership over their ideas, know they have an imagination, so that they can then start to be able to hold words and move them around in their heads in order to create those sentences. Alongside that, there is the recognition that children all need to be given opportunity to develop their handwriting skills early on, because obviously there's some children who don't naturally necessarily want to write. They would rather be doing something else. Some children are very keen, they're doing a lot of emergent writing, a lot of mark making. Other children might rather be playing outside and doing other things. But what they're saying is that we want to make sure that every child is given the opportunity, and that there's a way of doing that in so that they realise what they are capable of. So there's kind of a shift away from expecting children to use whiteboards and pens, and actually giving them paper and pencils, and actually giving them the opportunity to feel how that pencil feels in their hand. And to develop a really good phonics program alongside that, so they have opportunity to really practice forming those letters. If they're unable to do it on paper straight away, they're doing it in the air, they're doing it in the sand, all of the things that are developing those fine motor and gross skills. And also giving them opportunity to do dictation. So really focusing on applying their phonic knowledge and their spelling, but in a way that really actually helps them eventually write sentences. So in reception, that might be dictating high frequency words. So they're actually really applying it. And when they actually come to write their sentence, they're actually successful. They know how to spell those words.
I was really interested to read the piece around dictation, because sometimes I feel like that's what a boring exercise that must be.
Yeah.
But why is dictation and children writing so important? What skill is that giving them? What is I know I read something around the cognitive load.
Yes. So the cognitive load is basically they're saying there's so many things to remember about writing. You know, children have got so much to hold in their head, thinking about what they need to say, then writing it down, and they've got to apply their phonics, their spelling, the grammar, the punctuation, all of those things, and it can be overwhelming. So they're saying that by separating that and getting them speaking orally first, developing that vocabulary, alongside mastering specific skills like handwriting, when they actually come to write down what they want to say, it's easy for them because they know how to spell certain words. They're very strong in their phonics. So the whole purpose of really introducing dictation earlier on is so that children feel equipped and actually motivated and know they know how to spell certain words.
And that can
And
be gamified, right?
yeah,
That can be enjoyable. And what
absolutely.
strategies would you use to make that more enjoyable than just miss? I remember the 70s, I'm really old, sitting in class, the dog, and how can teachers make that a little bit more enjoyable?
I think it's alongside all the practical things. So, and especially if children have got ownership. So if they've picked up a card, or and they say the word, and then and then you say, well, can you write that word down? So they're being told the word to write, but they've had a say in it, and not doing too much in one go. It's little and often, but giving them. And I think the one thing I noticed about the framework was recognizing that children need to be motivated and they need to be on board, because if they don't feel excited about something, they can't make progress. So, I think it's thinking very carefully about how you do these things so that children are actually engaged and wanting to do it. And, anything which lets them be hands-on and actively involved, and where they feel they have a say in it. And then you're using all those opportunities in order to record ideas and develop their handwriting. It's just getting those things really balanced,
Okay.
so that they're really prepared.
Okay, I love that. So cognitive load seems to be one of the newer catchphrases that's being bandied around, and many teachers don't have time to continue with study or to do that research. And when new terms come in, sometimes they can be a bit confusing. How would you sum up cognitive load and overload in one or two sentences?
I would just say it's where children can feel overwhelmed. So it's
Okay.
avoiding that possibility that a child is overwhelmed and therefore cannot make progress or apply their understanding.
Okay, so this is the child who might have a really good idea in their head, but holding the idea, trying to think about the spelling and the grammar and the paper and the pen, all of that just becoming too much,
Yes,
resulting in a freeze rather than
yes,
an attempt. So breaking it down.
yes,
And I have to say that's one of the reasons I love Mighty Writer is because it's visual and it's there in the classroom. So I know that if you're working with a whole class, you're going to be creating the story, creating the sentences. Children can swap in and out words they like, but it's there on the board so that they don't have to retain that in their minds at the same time they transfer those ideas to
yes,
the writing, right?
yes. Yeah. And I think it's about also really early on helping children realize they have an imagination and they have something to say and they feel a part of it. Because
Right.
so many children, as they get older, so many teachers I speak to, they're wanting the children to revise and edit their work, and they're just very reluctant to do that. And I think it's a lot of the time they're just not invested in it. And I think when they actually know they can, and they want to. And also, we're such powerful role models for them. If they see our positive relationship with language, like using Mighty Writer, using this as an opportunity to model a story or build a sentence, and they're just watching me do that, and they can see me change my mind without realizing, I haven't made a mistake. I'm wanting to improve it.
Yes.
All of those positively impact the way they perceive writing and
Yes.
it's a process rather than an immediate outcome.
I was with one class once, and on the wall, on one of the display boards, each child had a Polly Pocket, a plastic pocket, and the children would write a piece of work at in one week. They would go and put it into their Polly Pocket, and then as they developed it and grew it and improved it, if they loved it, they were allowed to put it on top, and so that you could see that development process. But each child was able to add through the year and what happened at the end of the year is you could pull it apart and actually see how much progress and development, which is very intrinsic in reward for those children, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so next question. What are the composition and pedagogy changes?
In terms of composition, it's talking about sentence construction just being kept very, very simple from reception to year two. So in those early 2 or 3 years, it's about children actually understanding what a sentence is, and they're no longer expected to write at length. Things that writing at length is really reserved now for Key Stage 2 and focusing on developing paragraphs and all those things. So in early years and Key Stage 1, it's more of a focus on actually composing and structuring individual sentences and doing that really thoroughly and doing it well. So, that focus on reception, it's saying keep it simple, but doing it well. So you're really avoiding any gaps and you're just gradually building on that. So you're still using a selection of conjunctions, you're still encouraging children to use adjectives. With Mighty Writer, I would be modeling even from reception, verbs and adverbs. So they're hearing that vocabulary, they're seeing it in context so that they can apply it when they're ready. And then they're starting to begin to link and combine sentences as they move through into year two. Writing at length is, like I said, much more reserved now for Key Stage 2. And it's also about using texts that are more specific to the skill you're working on. So rather than lengthy texts, sections of text or shorter books where it's specifically modeling the skills you're wanting children to use so that they've got a direct model to apply. And there's a lot more work on teachers very much modeling the planning process and working with children through it so they're not expected to be suddenly writing independently. They're really well supported through that process because at the end of the day, if they're given that support and they feel that they can talk about things and practice using that language, then they're more likely to be motivated, developing self-esteem, and they're much more likely to be independent later on. So there's a real focus on really motivating children, I think.
Right. I love that. I love the whole writing process thing that they've shared. And the term sharing is used instead of publishing. What do they mean by that?
in terms of sharing your ideas. So I think it's more to do with like working with partners, a lot more talk.
Right.
So you're writing for an audience or a purpose always, so children really feel that they are, but it's a lot more about working with other people and revising their work, etc.
Right. Awesome. Okay, my next question was, what is the new assessment model and support?
So the idea is that schools need to look at the way they're assessing and put in place an assessment framework which works right through the school, which is school wide, and where all teachers are really well trained in writing and aware of what needs to be looked at so that you've got real consistency through the school. And obviously, where you do have a high turnover of staff, there's a need for teachers to have constant training so everybody knows exactly what's expected, what they're looking for in a piece of work. So the assessment framework, I believe there's lots of different things in the actual new writing framework where you can refer to. They've got lots of examples of children's work, they've got assessment frameworks. So it's just a case of schools not completely changing what they're already doing, but it's just a case of looking carefully and thinking, right, are we doing all these key things? Do we have a really good handwriting scheme in place right from reception? Do we have a strong phonics program? What are the texts we're using? How are children working together? So it's all those things, identifying perhaps things that you might feel you can improve in your school, and just, checking you've got that really clear overview. Everyone's aware of it. And then there's obviously consistent formative assessment throughout the year, to identify children who, might need more support and where they're meeting and not meeting expectations.
Do you think they're revisiting this because they realize that those skills for children need to be revisited and also the skills of teachers need to be? Because I look at this and think, actually, I know teachers that do this really well, but has it come out because of the lack of consistency? Do you feel like it's come
Yes.
out because the
Yeah.
children need to be revisited after the pandemic? What do you think would be the reason they brought this?
Right, my feeling is that before they've done frameworks, but they haven't been for whole school. So they might have done one for Key Stage 1 or one for Key Stage 2. And there hasn't been anything where it's the whole school. And also, obviously, like you said, with the pandemic, oracy is a huge thing. So many children, are coming in on entry below where they need to be in terms of their vocabulary development. And there's a high number of disadvantaged children as well. And so the idea is that this is providing consistency, and it's giving, I think it is a very well balanced document. I've read it several times, and I think it really does want the best for children in terms of ensuring that we are giving every child maximum opportunity to be successful. And if everybody's talking about writing, that can only be a good thing.
Oh,
And I
100%.
definitely think it's done that, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And everybody's on board. Everybody's now reviewing their ideas and thinking, actually, how can we improve? And everybody's talking about it because it is for everyone.
Yeah. So it's not a case of we're doing this wrong. We need to completely
No, it
throw it all up
isn't.
in the air and wish for the best.
No,
It's more about
absolutely not.
revisiting and
Yeah,
refocusing on what have we
yeah,
got in place, what are we doing well,
absolutely.
because schools are
Yes,
doing phenomenal things that are just brilliant. Taking what you're
yeah,
doing well, revisiting what might need to be, slightly tweaked. Sometimes it's just a small tweak, but then
absolutely.
revisiting, refocusing. I think that's the
Yeah,
what I
and
took from it.
yeah, I think so too. And I think it is about being confident in your practice. And it's about thinking, well, I know, this is how children learn. This is what we're doing well. And this is what, because there's always things we want to adapt and improve depending on, whatever it is. So I think it's a case of, being confident and just being sensible and managing it in a way where, especially making sure that everybody in the school is on board and everyone's talking together and working together, because everybody's got different experiences. They're in different year groups. We've got different cohorts of children. Are we effectively making changes that are actively going to promote, good progress and,
It's brilliant.
a real love of writing?
I think it's like with everything, whether it's oracy or writing or math or inclusion, revisiting and just honing and tweaking is very, very much a need. So I think we covered everything on that question about the new assessment model. Nothing there that we left out. So, what does this mean for international schools? Are you able to give us anything, or would you like me to go into the
I
UAE context?
Yeah, that would be really helpful, actually. The one thing I would say is that it's in terms of training, if you've got a high turnover of staff, I think it's about
Mhm.
everybody being aware and always, knowing what's happening. And also for children with English as an additional language, the whole focus on oracy, vocabulary development is really quite significant, I would have said.
Awesome. So I do think that if you are a British international school, you are going to need to have a higher focus because in order to meet your accreditation standards, which might be UAE focused, but might also be, British schools overseas or British schools Middle East or the international accreditation bodies, you would need to evidence this in order to continue making progress. And there is also that assessment alignment for teacher assessment, that's replacing that secure fit with best fit. It's definitely there. However, if you're not a UK curriculum school, then I do also feel that we know that there are some brilliant frameworks and brilliant standards that come out of the UAE, come out of India, come out of Australia, come out of the UK, come out of America. And I think one of the privileged things I certainly feel it being in the Middle East for 14 years is having access to all of those frameworks. Not necessarily needing to meet the frameworks because we're not accredited by those frameworks, but being able to take and cherry pick all the best pieces from all over the world and provide a really good education for our children. So that's how I feel about it impacting on international schools if you're not a UK curriculum. Um, I think we've jumped. I've done the slides in the wrong order, so I'm going to come back to the EAL bit, Emma, if you don't mind, at the
Fine,
end of
fine.
this bit. Okay, so does this align with the UAE context? So, myself and my partner Paul, we went through a little bit about how this would look in terms of mandatory subjects. So, as we know, English is a mandatory subject in the UAE. And therefore your reading, your writing, your oracy, speaking, listening, all of this does come into our inspection framework and our requirement for literacy in English. Now there is a integration challenge because we have other mandatory subjects such as the UAE social studies and Islamic, and I did type Arabic, but it seems to have disappeared off the bottom. It might click in on my next click, but also with Arabic, so we do have that added pressure for time that we might not see in the UK, but we must take time to step back, look at our writing time, look at our curriculum maps, and make sure that we're reviewing that in order to put in that explicit teaching that the framework is recommending. It does not negatively impact on the mandated time for all of those local subjects. In terms of the UAE inspection framework, they judge the quality of education across the UAE, regardless of curriculum. So the framework's emphasis on composition, critical thinking, writing for purpose, it all aligns with our local mandates for developing 21st century skills and connecting learning to real world and national and global themes. So we definitely saw an alignment there when we were reading through. When it comes to inclusion and EAL, and after this, I'm going to skip back to the EAL conversation, the English as an additional language conversation for all our thousands of children who come from all over the world. So local frameworks do require robust provision for special education needs and disabilities, literacy, and for second language learners. So progress must be measured against those starting points. So even if a child is unable to master a topic, a part of literacy like writing, we do still need to measure where they're at and show progress for that. And I think that's where the Polly Pocket and things like that do come in. The Department for Education's focus on explicit teaching, oral composition, and reducing cognitive load is directly beneficial for the highly diverse population that we find here in the UAE. So, supporting those inclusive practices of explicit teaching, taking it back a step, it does definitely align with the UAE. So, let's go back to the EAL question that I had, Emma. Is there any comment inside the DfE framework around English as an additional language?
Yes, I think there is. I can't remember exactly what
Okay,
it says.
no problem, no problem. So when we were talking before, we came up with the oral composition, so that emphasis on teaching, speaking and rehearsing sentences. So we know that if English is new to you, practicing. We also know about the silent period. So sometimes when a child is new to the language, they will listen and they will probably comprehend before they start expressing. Any experience around that?
Yeah, a lot. And I mean, 1 in 5 children in the UK on entry to school are EAL children. And the silent period is, like you say, quite significant. But, a lot of the time they are literally just processing the language. And this is why I think in the framework where it's saying be ambitious for all children, I think giving them opportunity to access all that vocabulary, wide ranging, ambitious vocabulary, but doing it in a way that's really scaffolded, where it's easy to access, it's visual, and where they're engaged and being successful is, giving them successful experiences right from the word go. So, like with Mighty Writer, they can just select pictures. Even if they've chosen just two, I might connect those pictures together to make a sentence. They thought of the sentence, they've been successful. They're able to select pictures and organize their ideas. So it gives me a very good understanding of how they're thinking, how they're creating, even if they're not necessarily speaking. And because of the very, the repetitive nature, seeing sentences being built, the visual aspect, all of that helps to start to make sense of, the language, the order of words, the ability to move things around. And it gives them a chance to really explore and internalize it before they then start to say it.
And I think that is one of the things about, so I call Mighty Writer fuzzy felt for adults. It's for kids too. But and we love that you can take two words and you can transpose them and that it's not an error. It's playing, it's fun, it's exploring, but always you get to take that little full stop or that little period and just stick it at the end of the sentence. And it's a visual. So you're even though Mighty Writer is a physical, tangible, holdable product, it is actually very visual for children. So your visual learners are picking it up. It's auditorio because you're talking about it and you're enhancing it. So it's kinesthetic because it's movement. So you're getting all of those learning skills, all of those different learning styles into the sentence construction. And that's one. And a child can make a sentence without understanding any English at all because of the graphics, right?
Yeah. And they also, it's quite important that they actually can't go wrong using this. So they don't have to start in the top left-hand corner. Wherever they chose, whatever they do, they will be successful. So that positive reinforcement stops any potential barriers to their progress, because they're feeling motivated, they're successful, and of course that makes their self-esteem improve and they're wanting to engage.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So then you've got the explicit transcription, practicing handwriting, doing that. So give me a tip for a child who maybe doesn't like the feel of paper. So we're experiencing quite a lot of this because paper can be quite crunchy and
Yes.
sensory wise. What strategy have you used to help a child that might doesn't like the feel of the paper?
Okay. I mean, there's lots of other things you can use, isn't there? I mean, even if it's just drawing something in sand or using chalk on the outside area, all the things you can think of which will get them actually making that shape, feeling that shape in the air or on whatever it is. And, even if it's then a whiteboard, I mean, in the writing framework, they're saying move away from whiteboards and everything just because they're slippery. It's
Hmm.
not so. And I can see where they're coming from with that. But I think you just have to think, well, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that this child is engaging. So rather than using a material which is actually going to put them off and have the opposite effect, it's thinking, well, actually, what does work? What will this child engage with so they can make the progress?
Sure. And that could be if they don't mind the texture so much, it can be coloured pieces of paper, right? It doesn't have to be white and doesn't have to
Yes,
be
yes.
blue
No,
lined with a horrible
no, it could be
margin.
anything. No. And
And
that's where they're saying, make adaptations.
yeah, one of the things I did with one of my students once was I took a piece of laminate plastic and I laminate it so that it was stuck together. And then I placed that between the wrist and the paper because they have to make contact. So they could slide across the paper with their hand and
Okay.
yet still write onto the paper. So
That's a good idea. Yeah.
adding like a barrier in it
Yes.
can also help.
Yeah.
Explicit transaction, and then that targeted CPD, teacher training, teacher training, teacher training, teacher training. We can't expect them to do a job if they are not all on the same page in terms of the direction that we're going. So they know how
Absolutely.
to teach writing. We know that. We know how that, but being explicit with it and giving up that time is so important. And teacher training is vital to the
Yeah.
holistic development of a department, right?
Yeah.
So thinking about how this aligns with the UAE culture and values, that's a huge part of the work that we're doing out here. The framework is not statutory here if you're working in a UK school, UK curriculum, but does represent that UK best practice. And I'm sorry for any of you who are not UK curriculum that we always seem to transpose our, but take from it what you need, take from it what you like, and you're very lucky that you can discard what you don't like and what you don't do. So curriculum contextualization, writing tasks, especially in composition, to be used to strengthen a national identity, okay, and belonging where we like. So when Emma was talking about taking texts, maybe not a whole book, but taking a smaller piece of text, use a piece of text which aligns with the UAE values and culture, because then you're getting that double whammy of improving the writing, but also improving moral education and aligning with that UAE focus. Best fit in bilingual settings, the new best fit assessment model, which you can read about in the framework in depth, could be applied consistently across the school with a particular focus on how it measures English as an additional language or Arabic speaking. So you can use the same strategies for delivering English writing that we could to help us with our Arabic writing as well. And then this ensures fairness and equity in assessment outcomes. CPD, we're going to return to it again. Given the high staff turnover, in a lot of the UAE frameworks, we talk consistently about the staff. We know that we're losing staff regularly. And so implementing it in January, you're going to need to look at it and revisit it again in September, or if you're on an Indian curriculum, you're looking at March and reviewing it regularly and making sure your CPD there. Explicit teaching strategies for handwriting, spelling, and oracy, oral rehearsal is vital if we're going to see a long-term improvement in writing standards through consistency. So we've kind of wrapped through that very quickly, Emma, which is it's good because everyone's time is very valuable. Does anybody have any questions? We haven't had anything put into the chat at the moment, so Emma and I are going to waffle for a bit until you do put something in the chat. um, but yeah, so put something in the chat if you've got any questions. If you've got any questions later, you can always come back to us. We're not disappearing off the planet, and we're very happy to hear more from you. So Emma and her husband David, Mighty Writer is one of my most favorite writing tools ever in terms of, especially around that cognitive load we were talking about, being able to visualize something, play with it, and then not have to worry about the content. I can clearly can't worry about my handwriting or putting it onto paper because I don't have to hold that in my working memory in order to put it down on paper. And I can play with it and I can add a word here and there. So Mighty Writer have their own website, mightywriter.co.uk. You are very, very welcome to go out and have a look at that. If you want a first step before you go and look at the all of the masses of content they've got there, I do have a previous interview I've done with Mighty Writer on my website. There is a little bit of information on there. We do actually stock them in the center here. So like I said, come and feel it, come and touch it, come and play with it. Come and see how it works. You can have a training session with Emma. Emma will always come on one-to-one and show you how it works. We can do that here in the center, and you can pick up straight away. As you can see, there is significant impact on writing for students who use it. There's lots and lots of testimonials. And because I've waffled so much, I've got a question, which I love. Thank you so much, Alice. She says, thanks a lot for the session. How do I deal with a child who doesn't like to write but very smart if asked verbally?
Okay.
Emma, what would you say?
Well, my suggestion would be, in terms of if I was using Mighty Writer, I might have this on the floor, and they're able to, if they're very bright, they're obviously very engaged, they're selecting ideas. What I would be doing is if they chose some pictures or something, maybe they're saying that out loud. I would be modeling the transcription process. So they're seeing me, they're seeing my enthusiasm for it, they're seeing my relationship with print, they're seeing me saying, oh, wow, what a fantastic idea. So what I'm doing is I'm not putting them under any pressure, but I'm deliberately modeling it because this is how I want them to engage. Meanwhile, I would give them big bits of paper, pens, so that they've got opportunity. And actually, the first point is them actually choosing to want to put those ideas down. And some children might feel it's overwhelming to write too much, so I might start off, when I model, I'm just writing, an expanded noun phrase, for example, or just a small section of what they've thought of, so it doesn't feel overwhelming, it feels manageable. And obviously that first step is crucial, because suddenly they think, actually, I had a positive, you know reaction to that. I feel good about that. I've boosted my self-esteem, and it's giving them motivation to move forward and carry on. And that might take a while, but I think it's little and often, but every interaction they have with it is you're there modeling it. Wow, what a brilliant sentence you thought of. Do you mind if I write that down? And them seeing you do that.
Yeah, I think sometimes if they give us a sentence verbally, I mean, I don't know what age the child is, but if they're one of the littlies, you can write the sentence onto a piece of paper. You can chop the paper up so that you've got a word on each piece of paper. You can muddle it up and just start with creating the sentence, and then just say, "Can you write down one word?" And then build on it and build on that success. It's got to be success driven. So many children are. I was working with a child the other week, and he wrote a word, and the instant response was from the adult that was working with him to erase it because he'd spelt it wrong. I'm like, if you erase it once, he's going to be a bit upset. If you raise it twice, he'll probably never pick up a pencil again. You can't reinforce the unwanted. You can only reinforce the wanted. So allow them the freedom, allow them to make mistakes. Don't correct it. I can't stand
Yeah,
spellings being corrected on all of the text, Encourage it, get the flow, get the writing down. You can worry about spelling when they're much older. Right? Because that will come with the learning of the phonics and with the learning of reading and with the exposure to text. Spelling and everything will come later, but it's not going to come if they won't write at all. So
no,
take the pressure off. I had a paragraph once, and the child brought it to me, and spelling was it was red pen everywhere. It was the olden days. And I said, okay, fine. So I took the piece of paper and I photocopied it, and I took away all the red marks, so it just had his piece of text. And I went through with a highlighter and I highlighted everything that was good. And that made him think, oh, I'm not as bad as I thought I was. And so by reinforcing the positive, so if they've made mistakes, don't tell them you've made a mistake. Tell them
yeah,
they've done it right. If they want to revisit it, they will. If they're not interested in revisiting, they'll do it through age. It all comes with age. No pressure
yeah,
on these little ones.
yeah,
This
absolutely.
is my opinion. So
Yeah,
do it well, do it good, teach them, give
yeah,
them opportunity, give them praise. The negativity can work when they're in their
yeah,
exams when they're older, is in my
yeah.
opinion.
I agree, because with the Mighty Roger, if they were selecting pictures and I couldn't think of a way to connect them together to make a sentence, for example, then I'm not under any pressure. The fact is that if I can't think of something, maybe someone else can. If no one else can, well, let's swap a picture, because that's what an author does. They're actively changing their mind. Some things work, some things don't. So it's the process, and I think all of that's really healthy, and giving children that permission to experiment with language. I think it's vital, because that is what an author does.
Absolutely. It's what we all do. That's why we
Yeah,
have a new framework, because that's what the
yeah,
framework people have done.
yeah,
Right?
yes, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I hope that helps, Alice. Have we got any other questions? So on Friday morning, we have got Widget, who are a communication symbols provider. They are in the centre from 9 to 11. We also have Everway here, who are formerly known as Text Help. They do speech to text software and speech to text and text to speech. I have to think about I had to say that. So they're here on Friday. So if you want to pop over and have a chat with Widget, you can also have a little fiddle with Mighty Writer while you're here. And we've got lots of other things coming up. So I know that you have put together an audit checklist, Emma. That's right? And I feel that I think I'm aware that we can share that out to
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
afterwards. So
yeah.
we've got an audit checklist that we can share out with you. We will share the framework out with you. We'll share a link to the video so you can revisit this, but also share it with your colleagues. And also then we have a summary PDF that we will share as well. And if there are no other questions, all that remains is for me to say thank you massively to Emma. I know you've done a couple of these webinars now, so you're probably overwhelmed with the amount of interest in the framework. Really grateful to you, especially, with the time zones and everything coming online, sharing with us out here in the Middle East. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you,
you to
Louise.
everybody. You're very welcome. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. And if you're around on Friday, come and join us. And if you're not, stay tuned. Follow us on socials at Louise Inclusion, LinkedIn and Instagram, because we are running many of these free webinars to try and upskill our community as much as we can without charge, because we know that that's an issue here. So see you Friday. If not, we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks very much again, Emma. Really appreciate it. Go off and warm up with a nice warm drink. And we won't be envious. Well, I'm envious of the fall and the flat and the leaves coming down and the color
Yeah.
changes. I'm not envious of your temperature. So you take care, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you.